Good morning, Dover Baptist Church. Hope you are all doing well. It's been a fun series we have been on, Not Alone, and I hope you've been joining us and meditating and thinking through some of these themes we've been tackling, themes like trial and suffering, difficulty, and seeing how God is the Good Shepherd and He leads us through each of these themes, these seasons in life we may go through. And just want to do a little segue related to some of these topics really quick and spend a couple minutes talking about suffering and about the problem of evil. Now, many books have been written about this, and so I don't intend to answer all your questions in under 5 minutes. However, I know that these are themes some of us, we really do wrestle through. And so I thought it'd be worth taking a couple minutes to address it. Generally, David Hume was the Western philosopher who popularized this idea that either God was all good, or not sovereign, or he was sovereign and not all good. Because he looked at the world and he saw suffering in the world and he thought, how could a good God, an all-powerful good God, allow this kind of suffering? And for him, it was the greatest evidence against Christianity and theism in general. So we're going to just spend a couple minutes talking about that. Thing one, if you are a reader, I'd encourage you to buy one of two books that'll really delve into that theme and answer it more completely. First is a book by John Stackhouse called Can God Be Trusted? John Stackhouse wrote this book through Oxford University Press as a Christian philosopher. And so he begins talking about making an argument for theism in general. And by that, thinking about Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. And then he ends with just talking about Christianity, speaking as a Christian philosopher. And he makes a lot of really good points in this book worth reading. For example, he argues that as Christians, we shouldn't be on the defensive. That secularists really have failed to make an adequate explanation for what he calls the problem of good. And so he'll write, for instance, if we believe the secular worldview that everything is simply a case of matter plus time plus chance, how can we account for any goodness, any love, any kindness? Good is a problem for the secularist just as much, if not more, as evil might be a problem for the theist. Again, I can't tease out a whole book in a couple minutes. I would encourage you to read it if you think through this. I'd encourage you to read Tim Keller on the reason for God. Tim Keller is one of those authors you will hear me quote a lot. I think he's a rare modern author that almost everything he writes is worth reading. And so he makes a great case in The Reason for God for belief in Christianity over against the problem of evil and suffering. Now, in our final minute or two, let's just talk about what the scriptures say and about Hume. So Hume's big problem is, if God can either be all good and not all powerful, or all powerful but not all good. He's setting up a false antithesis. And as Westerners, for some reason, we love to do this. We love to think in either or categories. And sometimes they are helpful, and sometimes they are neither helpful nor logically demanded, and they actually are really unnecessary. And I think this is one of those cases, because it actually starts from a remarkable level of arrogance. He is assuming that God must be one or the other, and that it is impossible to have an event of admittedly suffering that an all-powerful, all-loving God would use for his good. You heard me quote in the sermon this past Sunday, Deuteronomy 28:28. Or no, 29:29, sorry. The hidden things belong to the Lord, but the revealed things belong to us. That is this powerful reminder that as followers of God, we are to exercise a great measure of humility. God is not going to reveal everything to us. He is all wise. He is all knowing. He is all loving. He is all powerful. We are not all any of those. God is God, and we are not. There's this great argument that came up between Luther and Erasmus in the Reformation debates, relatedly, not exactly the same topic, where Erasmus was arguing, let God be God. No, let God be good. And by that, he was meaning, God we could understand. And Luther said, let God be God. He is God, we are not. We see this played out in the prophetic literature. I'd encourage you this week to read the book of Habakkuk, particularly if this is something you struggle with. Habakkuk starts where we see this prophet struggling over the moral degradation of Israel and saying, God, where is your justice? In the midst of such evil and suffering, where is your justice? He's crying out to God. And then God says, okay, I'm going to tell you how my justice is going to be. I am going to send the Babylonians or the Chaldeans down, and they're going to punish Israel for their sin. And that doesn't make Habakkuk's life any easier, because now he says, wait a minute, you're going to use an evil nation to punish wicked Israel? God, how is that good? And in the 4 short chapters in the book, there is this wrestling. And after God has given Habakkuk his message on what he's going to do, chapter 3, verse 1, Habakkuk says, I love it, O Lord, I have heard the report of you, and in your work, O Lord, do I fear. It's this amazing thought. I think sometimes we wonder, God, if you're good, how could you let this happen? How are you going to use this suffering and evil for good? And sometimes I think it's good that God doesn't tell us. Because if we knew, we might be afraid. It actually does not help us to know. I think it hurts us. If you knew that the reason you had to go through some trial at the front end was because God was going to work it in a particular way, would that really help your walk with God? I don't know that it would. I don't think it would. I think like Habakkuk, we might be in fear. But Habakkuk stays with the Lord. And by the end of the book, he has one of the most remarkable moments of praise in all of the scriptures. He writes, though the fig tree should not blossom, nor fruit on the vines, the produce of the olive fail, and the fields yield no food, the flock be cut off from the fold, and there be no herd in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will take joy in the God of my salvation. God, the Lord, is my strength. He makes my feet like the deer's. He makes me tread on high places. That is the God who we worship. And he is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And he will work all things for good. And we can praise him that we can't see how he's going to do it. I think that is grace to us. Hope you have a great day. God bless.